Alright, game number 2 of today's live stream, in which I'm covering the 45-45 season 13 league games. And we are now looking at board number 2, game of the season, board number 2. Let's begin. It's the game Transu against Namolin, and we're starting with e45. It's the Italian game, castle, knight f6, d3, h6, c3. So far so good. Here d6 is the main move, and d5 is a mistake. This could be severely punished here, but white is missing his chance going bishop to b5. If e takes d5, black's in big trouble, because the move that was probably intended, knight takes d5, leads to an awkward situation. You have to queen b3 when it's not clear how black can deal with these threats. Well, to be honest, he can't keep his position together. What to do? It's just nothing to do here. Usually in these kind of situations you could bail out with knight a5, but here you can't. You're just losing material after queen b5 check. So this is why d5 was too early. You want to do this after you have castle, to you have this kind of move available. And other than that, bishop e6, there's queen takes b7, knight e7, there's knight takes e5. So this position, you could say, is already lost for black, because there's no good way to deal with the threats. Actually, knight e7 is even worse. Again, queen to b5 picks up the piece. So yeah, gotta be careful with these pawn moves in the center if you haven't finished your development yet, or rather also if your king is still in the center. White misses the chance, goes bishop b5 check. Bishop b5, excuse me, no check. Bishop g4, takes on c6. Not sure if this is necessary. It's an option. I mean, I guess it's a matter of style, but you could also play something like h3, bishop to h5, knight bd2, and you can always play this later. You don't have to play this now. I like my bishops. I mean, that's just my personal thing, and if I give up one of my bishops, I really want to get something for it. And here I'm not sure how much you're getting for the bishop. Of course you're weakening the black pawn structure, but is this sufficient? Okay, it's possible. Takes h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes, castle, rook e1. And here black, Namolin, you go rook to b8. That's a useful move in general, to put the rook on the half-open b file, but white just played rook e1, and it seems you're just ignoring that white played this move, because here white is threatening to take on d5 and win the pawn on e5, and it seems you just ignored that, and actually white didn't do this either. Not sure why not, maybe afraid of some counterplay here, but it doesn't seem to me that black will get enough compensation here. Sure, black's up in development, but the white position is pretty solid. So I think this pawn could have just been taken, and white would be up a pawn. So you want to pay attention to your opponent's moves, and if there are any threats that your opponent is posing to you. Rook b8, knight to d2, a6. I did not get this move, really, to be honest. This just seems to me a waste of time. Again, this pawn is hanging, so you want to play a move like rook e8. Also in the position earlier, I didn't say that, but rook e8 here, or queen d6, both defending the pawn, both natural moves would be pretty fine. Same goes for this position, rook e8 here to defend the pawn would be a good choice. And I thought that maybe you were afraid of something like knight b3, and that the bishop would run out of squares, but after a4 you can still go a6 or a5 here, and you don't have any problem. So not sure why you played a6. If you're watching right now, feel free to let me know in the chat. Alright, well, I made a mistake here, sorry guys. So this is not board 2, it's board 4. My apologies, not sure why I messed this up. It's somewhat odd, but yeah, this appears to be board 4. Okay, anyway, so board 4, sorry about that. Let's continue. And we have the move b4. I wasn't really happy with this move because you're also weakening yourself here. Yes, you're gaining space on the queen side, but you're also weakening yourself. So I think instead you could accomplish the same, pushing the bishop back with knight to b3, and then after bishop d6, play bishop e3, go after the dark squares here on c5, and seems you're just a bit more comfortable here. Okay, so let me show you what I don't like about this. After bishop d6, knight b3, here black could go d4. And now we see why it is possible, right? Just because you have this pawn a little bit exposed on b4. So now if you take on d4, black could take on b4 with tempo, so this would be no good. Probably you should go a3 here, but after d takes c3, bishop e3, black has some options here. For example, c5 is interesting to create counterplay. And if knight takes c5, then a5, and to loosen up this whole grip on the dark squares a little bit. Interesting. Definitely some options here. So this is why I did not fancy this move too much here, playing b4. Okay, rook e8, knight to a5. And here c5 is just a blunder. You need to defend a pawn like this. Rook b6 was necessary. Obviously not a move you're very happy to make, but it's necessary. It works because of the bishop e3, again there's d4. C takes d4 and bishop takes b4, actually now attacking both these pieces. So this would be a nice turnaround for black. And after bishop d2, bishop f8, let's say, knight b3. Yes, white is better, but not so much has happened. So still in the game, still everything to play for. After c5, you just lost here because you're losing the exchange on b8. Plus also this guy is hanging on h6, well spotted by white here because of the loose knight on f6. C takes b4, c takes b4, bishop takes b4. And now it seems to me that Transu, you tried to be a little bit too smart, I guess, or and that backfired. Yeah, we still need to be careful when we are in a winning position like this one. Rook ab1 looks good first to pin the rook, but black has actually two ways to respond about it and also make use of this guy still being attacked in h6. So rather than rook ab1, you could just go rook eb1. And same idea, also pinning the bishop. Rook b6, now play the bishop back to g5, and white is up in a healthy exchange here, full exchange, so white should win this position. The problem with rook ab1 is that black has actually two ways. Queen d8 was played. This is nice to defend the rook and the knight, threatening both to take on h6 and e1, but there was an even better way to implement this, and it was to go rook b6. Same story. Defend this guy and defend this guy, so rook, bishop takes e1 is a threat, and here, yeah, pretty much all the advantage is gone. Probably best would be to give back the exchange right away for rook takes b4, but this is not giving white that much anymore. Maybe a little bit better still here because white has the strong bishop on c3, but obviously it's not nearly as clear as we just had seen it where white was up a full exchange. So different story here. Let's go back to the game. Queen d8. This also forces white to give up material, but queen g3, this is still clearly better for white. After knight h5 though, here an important moment to not go queen g5, which happened in the game. Then white doesn't have any advantage anymore. But to play queen takes e5 to attack the knight on h5 in this manner. Black take on e1, rook takes, g takes h6, queen takes h5. And now white is still up a pawn. Also, what's important here is that the king is pretty weak on g8. Wow, I can even make it red. Nice. And this promises white good winning chance for sure, being a pawn up. Plus the black pawn structure is also pretty damaged, as you can see. So I think white has a good chance here to win still. After queen g5, however, the advantage is gone. Takes on e1, takes on g5, and the endgame is just equal material-wise, and yeah, no advantage. It's even black who can maybe play for something. c6. Yeah, just a small thing. You could also go g5 here to be able to play knight to f4 and take back the g-pawn. And if e takes d5, there's always rook d8. It's still equal, but it's just another option you had. After c6 here, probably what you should do, Transu, is just to go g4. Just force matters, go into a rook in game, rook c1, and yeah, rook b2, and it will be a draw here. Takes, 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 takes. This should be a draw. But this is what you need to do. Sometimes you need to go for a draw, even though, of course, I can understand that you were not too happy with this position, considering that you were up a full exchange earlier. But sometimes we just have to, well, call our losses and then go for a draw. King h2, rook b1, g3, rook a1, g5. Good play here by black. Really, this sequence of moves is really good. Bringing the knight back into the game, perfect. Oh, I missed one move here for white. It's a really tough move to play. I think even grandmasters would have trouble finding it. It's the move d4. The point is to weaken the black pawn structure. Takes, takes, and now black has these double pawns, which are weaker and more vulnerable. King f1, knight f5. Still, black's in the driver's seat, but this is the best white can go for. So d4, just want to point out real quick, but tough move to play. King f1, knight to e6, bishop b2. And here, just take on e1. Was played, sorry, but just keep the rook active. So you see, your rook is active and you don't want to exchange it against a passive rook. This is in general a good rule of thumb. If your piece is more active than your opponent's piece, then don't exchange it. Don't exchange an active piece against a passive one. So why not rook a2? First looks a little bit strange because the rook is trapped here on a2, but you can fairly quickly realize that this will not stay this way with knight c5 and various threats here. d4 takes, and now you just emerge a pawn up here in the endgame, and this should be winning, I believe. Yeah. This also looks promising, of course, with knight c5 here and the double threat, but it's not as promising as the other position because you don't get connected past pawns. Still, yes, probably you could argue that this position is winning as well. Let's say knight d6 here, h4, takes, takes, knight c4, bishop c1, f5. Also gives black pretty good winning chance, but I would prefer the other one because if it's not winning, then what can you do? Here you don't have too much leverage. With the rook still on the board, there's always more play still. Here the problem is that knights don't really like remote passed pawns on the h or a file. So you have to deal with this, but on the other hand, black's up a pawn in control. I could see that going black's way here, but it still will take a decent amount of work. After king f3, you head in the wrong direction. Knight d2 check, and knight d2 was not the mistake. Well, it was an inaccuracy. Knight e4 is a mistake now. You could have still kept your advantage here by going king f7, h4, takes, king e6. But again, this h-pawn, probably white has enough counterplay. For example, one sample line could be knight e4, knight takes, king h5, king goes back, but white just keeps pushing the pawn, and activity is everything in the endgame. And here, even though white is down 3 pawns at the moment because of this active king, he should be able to draw this. So just a nice sample line. Still, this was a better try than knight e4, because here after king f5 you really don't have any advantage at all, because the king is so active and the bishop works well on both sides of the board. Takes, king f6. Here you go knight takes h3. Doesn't matter at this point, both moves are a draw, but why not go e4? Why not keep this pawn for now? This guy you can still pick up later pretty much. Knight takes h3, bishop takes e5. And maybe here you still want to play for a win. I cannot say, obviously, from the distance. You're still up a pawn, that's true, but you don't have any advantage because king activity. King activity is pretty important in the endgame. And here, obviously, white king is much more active than black king. So white would not have any trouble here equalizing. And by playing g4, you actually end up in a losing position because of the unfortunate position of your knight on h3. So c5 should be played to take away the square on d4, and one sample line could be like this. King now becomes active, white wins the pawn back, and this would be a draw. Okay, this would lead to a draw. Even though already it feels like black has to be more precise than white here, because the bishop can very easily play on both sides of the board. It's a long range piece, whereas the knight obviously takes much more steps. So it's a short range piece and better on one side of the board. After g4, unfortunately for you, and fortunately for Transu, for a white player, this position is now lost because the knight will be lost on h3. It is trapped. So here black resigned. Yeah, a roller coaster game, you could say. Ups and downs. First white is winning, then black came back, black was winning, and now in the end white won after all. I think a lot of tactics here that really decided this game. Tactics and calculation. That was really the main theme in this game, I would say, from both sides. First allowing white to win the exchange, then white not holding on to the exchange, giving it back, and then in the endgames are very often all about calculation, and that's where it went wrong then in the end for black, missing this chance for white to trap the knight on h3 in the very end.